am definitely not your typical podcast guest. Like, I'm dying to see where this goes. And I messaged Chase and I'm like, so outline, question, anything? And he's like, no, we're just going to wing it. And I'm like, that is John.
Fuck it in.
So here we go.
Yeah,
like,
fuck it in.
He makes it very easy to talk to.
I hope so.
In answering that question, and Ben and I have been married for, it's going to be 20 years this year.
Wow.
I may be exaggerating. We've been together for a long time,
Yeah.
longer than we've been apart. And we definitely have one of those could be a cheesy rom-com like romances where he was exactly my type and not even my type a little bit. And I wasn't going to date, and I was in college and he was a little bit older, and I saw him and instantly it was like, great, I'm going to marry this guy. We hadn't even talked yet. And I knew. And we dated.
You saw you sweeping up at
yes,
UCSB.
I was a janitor. I mean, it was called a facilities coordinator,
Yeah.
but I mopped up vomit at UCSB.
There you go.
And his brother was a basketball coach there, and he was there for the summer being a camp counselor for basketball. And I saw him, and it was just instant. And we ended up going out like for the week that he was there because he didn't live in California, and then he left, and I was never going to see him again. I saw him again, and that turned into like this 2-year long distance relationship that was dramatic and romantic and all of the things until I gave him the ultimatum, was like, either move here or this is it. Mm-hmm. And it was it. He was like, all right, it's it. And we broke up, and the feeling of like life without him.
Yeah. And
I remember I was like, I'd grown up an atheist, not like my personal choice, not my parents. And my faith just started to unravel and open up after I met him. And I just became a lot more open and started praying a lot more. And at one point when we were broken up and I just thought everything was over because I knew I was going to marry him, I remember saying a prayer and just saying like, God, please just like, let me have him. I promise you, like, you know, that whole bargaining we do with God where we're like, if you just do this, like, especially when we're younger. Totally. So here I am, 21, and I'm making a deal with God that's like, if you just give me Ben, I promise you we will survive anything you throw at us. Wow. Like, life can be as hard as you need it to be, and we will survive it so long as I have him, okay? Like, deal. And, of course, you know, 20 years later, I remember that bargain because God held up his end. Okay, I gave him to you. But just there's such a big part of Ben and I that we both just have this confirmation that, you know, before this life even, we made a deal with each other that we were going to do this with each other, that we were going to come down here, we were going to find each other, we were going to get married, and we were going to tackle whatever life threw at us. And so I think that sort of like bigger perspective has got us through a lot of the unexpected trials or helped us be more patient with each other, because it has not, like, what life has thrown at us has not been easy on our marriage by any means. And we're so far from perfect, and we're working on it every day. But we had our first son, and I was working at the time, and Ben was working. And when I was pregnant, I got hyperemesis, which I don't know if you know what that is. It's basically like you can't get out of bed. You're throwing up all the time, and pregnancy is absolutely miserable. So I quit my job and I stayed home and I threw up all the time, and I fell into like this deep hole of depression. And then my son was born, and he was the best thing to ever happen to me. And I had not postpartum depression, but I had postpartum anxiety. And I just lived in constant fear that I was going to lose him. And it was mostly this constant fear that if something happens to him, I will not be able to go on. And I didn't want people to hold him, and I didn't want to leave the house. And I would like check his breathing 1,000 times a night. And it was obsessive, and it was all consuming. And it took months before I realized that this was an actual hormone imbalance and disorder that women suffered from. But I just thought, I suck at this. And so it was a little like I had already started to get better before the option of medication. So I pulled through that just in time for my son to be the most difficult newborn that ever existed. Yeah. And he had sleep apnea, and he was sensitive to foods, and he was sensitive to light, and he cried all the time, and he was simultaneously the happiest baby in the world and the most miserable. And I was convinced that I was the problem. I was convinced that I was not cut out for this, and that I wasn't good with kids, and that I wasn't like he was the best thing I had ever done, and I was failing him,
Mm.
and it put a lot of strain on our